Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss a very important topics of literary theory, deconstruction or post-structuralism. Let us find what deconstruction means. After new criticism and structuralism, the latest development in the technique of literary criticism is deconstruction, which provided a promising alternative to Freudians, Marxists, and others. It was conceived by the French philosopher and critic Jacques Derrida, who expressed his own deconstruction mainly of grammatology. In practice, deconstruction is exemplified primarily in the critical readings made by Jacques Derrida of a series of texts in the history of Western philosophy, from Plato to Descartes, Rousseau and Hegel to Husserl or Heidegger, and of a series of more recent texts in the history of structuralism and post-structuralism, from Chaucer to Levi-Strauss, Lacan, and Foucault. Taking an example, Derrida's analysis of Husserl, Jonathan Carlyle describes it like this. Deconstruction thus undertakes a double reading, describing the ways in which lines of argument in the text it is analyzing call their premises into question, and using the system of concepts which, within which a text works to produce constructs, mass as difference, and supplement, which challenges the consistency of the system. Joshua Harari picks on Derrida's analogy between deconstruction and desedimentation to explain reconstruction as the tracing of a path among textual strata in order to stir up and expose forgotten and dominant sediments of meaning which have accumulated and settled into the text fabrics. Thus, deconstruction is really a technique of de-sedimenting the text in order to allow what was always already inscribed in its texture to surface. The deconstructive reader exposes the grammatological structure of the text by locating the moment in the text which harbors the unbalancing of the equation. Thus, sleight of hand at the limit of the text, which cannot be dismissed as contradiction. M.H. Abrams argues that most distinctive part of Derridian theory is that he shifts his inquiry from language to the written or printed text, and the second that he conceives the text as an extraordinarily limited fashion. Abrams' statement implies for Derrida, writing is the printed or the written text, and the text is extraordinarily limited. Another commentator on Derrida is Newton Garver, who argues that Derrida is one of the philosophers of language who emphasizes the superiority of rhetoric over logic. Garver's arguments that Derrida shifts the importance from logic to rhetoric finds support from Zehilis Miller, who states that deconstruction is an investigation of what is implied by this inheritance of figure, concepts, and narrative in one another. Deconstruction is therefore a rhetorical discipline. Murray Krieger believes that Derrida is a critical structuralist who outdoes structuralism and perhaps undoes as well, and that his assault is a newer form of the oldest attack on the poet as myth maker by Plato. Let us now take up the basic terms that Derrida seeks to demolish traditional criticism and facilitate the act of deconstruction. First of all, writing and speech are the pivotal words of grammatology. Metaphysics and theology assigned to the written word a secondary place, and to the spoken word the primary place. Derrida argues that traditional concepts of speech and writing have been shaped, conditioned, and governed by metaphysics. Language is a system of science and of the relation between language and reality as a relation between a set of signifiers and a corresponding set of signifiers. A signifier within language refers and corresponds to a signified outside of language. But the two, signifier and signified, are not the same. Modern linguistics, to which structuralism is highly indebted, is based on the modern signifier, signified concept. Structuralism that is indebted to that concept often claims to have made the study of language and the act of criticism scientific discipline. Derrida shows that this claim is false because the signified concepts of language that linguistics has handed down to us is another version of the traditional concept of speech and writing. Another term of deconstruction introduces is graphocentrism. Graphocentrism. Writing is a graphic. A grapheme, according to traditional concept, is a pure signifier, which means that a unit of writing has no relevance other than simply representing a voice. Therefore, graphocentrism can mean the shift in importance from speech to writing. It is a reversal of the traditional concept of the superiority of speech or the spoken word over the writing or the written word. In a way, Derrida is effecting a shift from logocentrism to graphicocentrism. Derrida has grouped metaphysics, linguistics, and structuralism into one category. All the three disciplines have expelled writing as secondary, as something that exists only to represent the voice that it embodies, the voice that reveals the meaning. Derrida calls this concept of writing the vulgar concept. He dismisses this vulgar concept and attempts to liberate language and criticism from the totalizing and totalitarian influence of metaphysics. And this he does by introducing the new concept of writing based on the very complex word difference, trace, and arts writing. Derrida's attempt is to demortify our understanding of language. Therefore, deconstruction begins with the demystification as well as demythification of the traditional concept of language. Deconstruction urges that the whole problem and history of language must be entirely thought. The result of the rethought is the conclusion that language is writing. This means all that a critic can do is to partake in the forces of difference and move along the trace. The possible way of the deconstructive critic is to criticize a text, is to use the rhetorical, etymological, and figurative analysis and emerges with newer interpretations. Shankaran Ravindran says that in spite of difference that the writer makes between one word and another, he can never express his meaning accurately and exactly. He must always mean more than and something different from what he indicates through writing. The critic, therefore, is to take the words of the poet or the writer not as outward visible graph of his meaning, but merely as trace or indicator of his meaning. The critic, taking his cue from the trace, must go out on a quest of a closer approximation to the real meaning of his author. He must recreate the poem according to his own apprehension. No critic will, of course, be able to claim that he has reached the true meaning of the poet, and that is why criticism must be an endless pursuit. Thus, it is a movement forward and backward from the text. Thus, to understand or to criticize a poem by W. Yeats, the critic has to have a knowledge of the author's work that influenced Yeats and authors and works that have thrown light on Yeats. So, criticism becomes a participation in the movements of the science under erasure. Thus, business of the critic is to deconstruct an existing construct and then to reconstruct it so as to liberate from the concept of metaphysics. This is really very difficult explanation of deconstruction. Uh, what we can say that deconstruction is very difficult to understand, and if we go through the text, we will be able to understand what is deconstruction is. Thank you everybody.